The reason why Grande Prairie makes very good fighters is actually the location that we're in and the way that people grow here. You know, Grande Prairie is one of those cities that there is a lot going on all the time. There's a lot of crimes going on. There is a lot of depression people are fighting. A lot of issues going on with the city. A town that is so focused on working all the time. So you naturally need to develop a very tough mindset just to be able to go through your day.
MMA stands for mixed martial arts and bringing them together into one sport. Well, when I got started in the sport, it was still mostly called NHB, no holds barred. I mean, they hadn't even dubbed MMA yet. When we first started fighting, my first fight was no gloves, no rules. You could pretty much do anything. There was very few weight classes, if any, and it was more of a spectacle than a sport.
Grande Prairie has a long history of combative sports. The original first recorded match was in 1914. It was just a little west of here, towards Saskatoon Mountain, where the original Grande Prairie was supposed to be. They had a huge event at the time, and it was full of sports. It was on the summer. Then World War I hit. A lot of the young, healthy young men got recruited. And, you know, during a time of war, not only was there rationing going on and so on, things are a little more difficult, but people don't have the appetite for combat sports because there's so much real combat going on. But in peacetime, they love it. The UFC, the boxing, everything else, because they're not touched by it. There was a bit of a pause there throughout the early 20s, then late 20s it came roaring back and boxing became big again. And this was before the commission. So before there was even a commission there, boxing was like, it was like something you could experiment with. Now, boxing already had a history in the States, but in Grande Prairie, with no commission and no real rules, you would have a 3-on-1 boxing match. Blindfold boxing, right? The stuff we laugh at, and you know, you see the odd vintage clips of that on YouTube.
And over the years, it's become a sport. They've, you know, introduced rules. We now have unified rules. We have weight classes. At one point, I believe it was the fastest growing sport in the world.
When I came to Canada, I came with 2 luggage, with a lot of hope that God is gonna be with us all the time, but talk to us long time to get used to, because it's totally different. I need to adjust myself, and also my family has to adjust everything for the brand new lifestyle that we was looking for.
When we arrived here, it was in February, I think it was like -1, and I was frozen. And I remember I said, it's so cold. And the people said, no, it's so warm actually.
I don't know, it was a big change for us. We saw snow in the movies. We never really got to see snow back home.
The Grande Prairie Boxing Association went until 2008 is when I arrived there. And I got the call. It says, hey, Raph, I have to leave. Do you want the gym? I had to really think about that. I'd never run a gym before. I'd run a construction company. I'd worked in oil and gas, but a gym is a whole different animal. There's a genesis of kickboxers that have come out of there, different martial arts. I think it's time to change it from the Boxing Association to something that really captures everything that we really do. One of the things I've always debated on was when I started was, am I gonna be the man who runs it all, or am I gonna get other people involved, make it like a hub, like an open source, you know, like where everyone can come in, share their skills, and we grow this thing.
So being a non-profit organization, to me, is really important because everything that we do is focused on the community.
It's very family oriented. They push for your parents to be here, your grandparents, your kids. We do everything together here. They're always making sure that we're close.
And then Luis Martinez, who is humble enough, again coming to that, he shares the wealth when it comes to his talent and his teaching skills, his skills that he's come about, and brings that here and helps out. I've trained over with him to help with my Taekwondo.
So we start to get involved and start to work together, and we start to see a huge future for everyone who was interested to do MMA.
And we just grew and grew to the point where we were attracting coaches, which really helped a lot because I was doing MMA and boxing, teach a little kickboxing. But then one day a man came down the stairs. He looked familiar, and he introduced himself as Bill Mahood.
Geez, I started boxing probably when I was 5 years old and been involved in combat sports ever since. Fighter, coach, trainer, and mostly a teacher now in the last probably 15 years.
We're well-rounded in kickboxing, in grappling, in MMA. We're not just a one-sport academy. Our coaches are definitely world-renowned coaches, like Mr. Martinez, even Alexander Martinez. He's a professional MMA fighter. Not a lot of gyms can say that they have built their athletes all the way to a professional level.
My coach, Mr. Martinez, he's still competing, and how old is he? He just sets an example, so I think that's pretty sick.
Making his professional debut, representing Champion Jim from Grande Prairie, Alberta,
The instructors here are very, very helpful. You learn a lot from them. It's very motivating as someone who's from a different country to come to Canada and help this club.
Oh, inspiration, Bill Mahood. I get a lot of inspiration from him.
I've been grappling for many years, but I think when I started coming to see Bill, I believe that's when I finally truly started grasping the concept of fighting and grappling and jiu-jitsu.
Every coach has their own take. I believe that a good coach is always developing themselves. Every person that's on this path with you has their own path. Every person that does jiu-jitsu is going to do it a little bit differently. Every person that fights MMA is going to do it a little differently. I don't want to try and bash a square peg into a round hole, so I'm not trying to create 20 little me's. So the best thing you can do for people who trust you to help coach them is to always be learning and growing, but also to help them seek out other instruction.
I would like to encourage the people, whoever is not doing martial art, to get into it. Any physical contact that you find to do to yourself is really helpful to feel better as human being.
They're not understood in the beginning because I know want my kids training Taekwondo because they are going to hit somebody at the school. It's total opposite. It's total opposite because we teach the kids discipline.
If I was not involved in Taekwondo, that's like saying if a fish did not live in water, where do you think it will live? It just cannot. You think of a fish and you think of water. So for me, it's that you think of me, first thing you think of, Alexander Martinez normally comes out with martial arts.
I want people to be more aware of just how much people put into this, right? It's not like a job where you go in and you get your work done, you go home and you rest the rest of the day. This is day in, day out, 24 hours, 24/7.
There's always going to be someone better than you. So I think just to have that mindset is important.
Hardships of the MMA community in Grande Prairie would be the fact that you're in Grande Prairie. You're in a small town and you're fairly isolated. I mean, our closest big city would be Edmonton, which isn't even really a big city, but we're still 4.5 hours away.
The cost of living is one of the hardest things here, and if you're spending all your time training, you're not working, and unfortunately you don't get paid to train, and then Excessive Force decided to open up here in Grande Prairie, which was nice because now I got to fight at home.
To start Excessive Force, I wanted to start it probably 5 years before I did, but I also needed to make sure that I had everything in order. It was very meticulously planned. One of the first things I did, I bought the biggest cage I could possibly buy. Yeah, it'll limit the venues we can use, but it's going to give us more fan-friendly fight.
As you're starting out in this sport, most promoters won't pay to have you fly. So either you have to drive somewhere, which could be 12, 14, 16-hour road trip, or you have to fly on your own expense, which just never happens. So your opportunities to compete are a lot less.
The best thing that I could say to the fighters coming up, especially those that are single, is one, stay single, truly, because it's a tough sport.
Being a martial artist, it's tough.
It's hard on relationships, it's hard on families.
It gets old fast when, you know, like people are having dinner parties and you can't go.
You know, you might only work for minimum wage and only have enough money to be able to pay your bills off, or maybe you're riding a bicycle, but lower your cost of living as much as you can to be able to do what you do.
You know, this lifestyle doesn't get you rich for sure. Nobody loves a warrior until the enemy's at the gate.
The transition from the XSFC cars from here to Brave, of course, you know, is different now. I'm going from a local to an international car, you know, it's a little more pressure. It was my first time actually fighting. If somehow I got beat up or something, then it was gonna be right in front of all my friends, my family, people that I love. Now, going internationally into Brave CF, of course, is a bigger stage, you know, higher quality of fighters, so bigger level, all those things. The good thing about being able to have fought here in hometown and even competing in my all amateur career is I already learned how to deal with pressure in all those years. Even though it's different, I just got to treat like the old one and find ways to overcome those pressures and just give it.
I can say I started at 3 or 4, but I was really sad I didn't actually start getting good until you're like 7 or 8. Well, right now there's a lot of kids like me that I think want to do MMA, especially all around the world. There's crazy kids everywhere that's always training. But
what we're trying to do now is allow youth amateurs. So in a lot of provinces, they limit amateurs to the age of majority. It's just far too late to start as an amateur. You need to start, you know, amateur competition when you're 12, 13 years old and work through different striations, I guess, of it until you make that adult transition, and then you compete very briefly as an amateur and then become a professional.
in Grande Prairie, I think there is a lot of kids that want to do MMA but just don't really have, I don't know, have the base, I guess.
You know, it's like the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, right? Well, these guys have been my village. I've been here like all my life, basically, and it's been something that's been constant.
I wouldn't be to where I am if it wasn't for the people around me. I am not my own. I am made by many people.
Mixed martial arts is fighting for a sport. So the jiu-jitsu that we do, the type of boxing we do, will be based on mixed martial arts. So everything is geared towards, you know, the end result, which is getting in the cage and fighting.
Regardless how people look at this, it's still a very young sport. It's only been around for a couple of decades, and even then, it hasn't been understood for nearly as long.
The first event we ever had in Grande Prairie was MFC. Basically, it was an illegal show, but then we had no commission, so that was the end of that.
It was outlawed, it was non-sanctioned, nobody was really overseeing it.
So what we did was we held 3 events in a lot of different weight classes and ages. We invited people from the city, and we just showed them that it wasn't this barbaric sport that they thought it was.
And they were like, listen, we can't have these gray areas anymore. We have to make sure that we have this in place.
So we got people outside of the community to help us out, to support us in coming up with a bylaw.
So in Alberta, we have a municipal commission system. So every municipality can appoint its own commission. British Columbia, Ontario, New Brunswick, they all have provincial bodies. So they take care of everything from overseeing the promoters, the matchmaking, who's able to work on the events, doctors, medicals, pretty much everything that goes into having a safe event falls in the lap of the commission.
Their due diligence is to make sure that you're training fighters and you're putting on events, and they're there to protect everybody's best interest.
People who are involved in the sport understand that it's not all violence. Everyone loves the sport. They love to see people get, you know, messed up in the octagon. I think one of the things that needs more talking about is how to take care of the athletes. It's such an intense experience to agree to fight in the cage, to prepare to fight in the cage, but then the actual weekend where you go, make the trip and cut the weight.
Weight cutting, that was, you know, one of those things that you look back and shake your head.
Because I made the mistake my very first professional fight. I tried to cut 53 pounds in 7 weeks. And on weigh-in day, I tried to cut 13 pounds that day, and I ended up dehydrating myself so bad that when you pinch the skin, my skin would not retract. The only reason why the fight actually went on is because I purposely avoided the doctors. but I found afterwards it took me about a year to be able to take a punch to the head, to take it the way I normally would in training, because I had dehydrated so much water out of my body.
When we would be at the World Championships, you'd be weighing in the morning that you fought, and then you would be drawn that night, and then you might have to fight the next day, and therefore you'd have to weigh in the next day. And so for anybody that was a big strategy for them, you know, it really, really affected them.
But in California, they try to keep you within 10% of your weight class. And if you weigh in the next day 15% or more, they're looking at canceling fights. Because guys are like, oh, I can just rehydrate. But there's so much more to it, to rehydrating. You know, your organs have to reboot, your mind has to reboot. And, you know, you look at weight cutting and what it does to the body. That is far and away the one thing I would change, is the mindset of weight cutting and how detrimental it can be to your health and is to your health as a competitor.
You know, in the end, you know, is it a violent sport? Heck yeah. You know, you're going in there basically trying to knock someone out or submit them. It's violent. I think that the violence of it would be a big part of what people misinterpret. You know, a lot of people who aren't interested and they just think of it as a blood sport. You know, or back in the old days where they dubbed it as human cockfighting.
So going into the fight, my mental state was a little shuttered a little bit, so I had to get over that. Get to the fight, feeling good. Fight goes, bell rings. First round goes great. Second round, break my hand. Get to the corner, sit down, and I'm like, Bill, I broke my hand. And he's like, okay, Justin, this is what we're gonna do. It's gonna numb up. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And once it numbs up, you just keep throwing it. So third round, did not throw it. Fourth and fifth round, I threw it. Whether that was a good choice or not, I mean, I still won the fight. But yeah, I broke my second metacarpal, 2 pins, and 2 months of healing, and then I got back to training a little too soon and displaced the bone.
I took the spinning back elbow on the side and it caused a zygomatic fracture in my face. Sort of snapped 3 small bones in my face. Fortunately, it cut me above the eye bad enough that the ring doctors stopped it, because I actually had some fractures in my face that I was unaware of. It could have been a lot worse. It's really hard to walk away.
Whether it's physical or emotional, you're gonna have to face pain. If you let pain get on the way, if pain is something that stops you from doing things you love, then you're gonna have a very, very tough life.
So my most memorable fight would be one that happened a few years ago, and it was at a big heavyweight event, and Tim Hague was one of the competitors. And Tim was a guy that was very sincere with the commission. He was polite, he shook everyone's hand. He was in the ring and he was taking a beating. Finally, he wanted to end the fight and he gave the guy a drop kick, hit him in the leg, and broke his leg. Well, all of a sudden there's an ambulance and there's probably people trying to get him out of the ring, get him through the technical zone. Tim was very emotional about the whole thing, and I remember him coming over and talking to me. He says, I don't know, I just hit him and I guess I worked him out. And he says, you did good, you did your thing. We stopped the fight, he's gonna be all right. He's gonna go to the hospital right now, he's good.
Right, fight fans, I'm here with the winner, Tim Hague. Tim, I know how much respect you have for Caleb Starnes. You never want to see anybody hurt, but as he leaves the pavilion, I know you want to give it up for Caleb.
Man, Caleb's a very tough guy. UFC veteran of 5 fights like myself. And I just want to say a huge thanks to Darren Cliff and Grande Prairie. I love fighting here. You guys are awesome.
Shortly after that, Tim Hague was in a fight himself, and he died of injuries. It wasn't in the ring, but shortly after the ring. And that was tough to see. But he's very proud to be a dad, very proud to be a school teacher, very proud to be able to do this sport at his age. He was a very sincere guy. That's how I knew him. That's how I'm going to leave it.
Let's give it up for your winner and the new XFFC heavyweight champion, Tim the Thrashing Machine Hague.
But, you know, in my eyes, Tim will forever be the heavyweight champion of excessive force because he's never lost.
We'll talk about safety in the sport, and we talk about concussions, and then sometimes you'll talk about at what age do you start doing combative sports? You know, when do you start letting kids get punched in the head? For example, Ian just went and did the Cadet Worlds in Italy as a 16, 17-year-old group where they were allowed no head strikes whatsoever. So there were some people that were upset about this because, of course, you know, they're 16 and 17, and in boxing you strike to the head. But as a national president, we backed the IMAF, the International Mixed Martial Arts Federation, in adopting that rule because we just felt for the optics of it that it was, they'll have lots of time to get hit in the head. You know, why start too early? That's a big part of it. I think safety in the sport.
It's the only reason that we hope for that, because we want kids to be able to compete, but train, and we want them to do it in a safe manner.
And the injury levels are so much less than a lot of other contact sports like football. I mean, I believe cheerleading has a higher incidence of injury than MMA. And we know the stats because the International Federation has been logging it now for 7 years over, I believe, about 10,000 matches.
Humans are very complicated, and we have a wide range of feelings and need to express.
And I think that combat sports provides an incredible outlet. Everyone's there for a reason, but there were a lot of people that were there because they really, really needed martial arts and combat sport.
It started with me and a friend just wanted to do something to lose weight.
I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't want to be fat when I get older.
Because when I started, I was 220 pounds.
Came down and we started with boxing.
Go down to basement, push weights. Yeah, at first you're like, yeah, I can do this. No.
The first time we did it, I was like, I don't want to do it anymore. I quit. I did more and more and more, and then it slowly got easier.
And then a friend got me involved in, okay, we're going grappling and whatnot, doing this. And so I tried, and I started loving it.
It didn't feel like a job coming down. You didn't come down here and dread showing up.
I was stubborn. I wanted to keep improving myself.
It's got me into shape. I weigh less than 12-year-old me at this point in my life.
I can train, and at the same time I can have fun doing it.
I get a lot of satisfaction in watching people achieve their goals or overcome their self-imposed limitations. Seeing people come into the gym and have the attitude that they can't do something, and 6 months later all of a sudden seeing that they have that attitude that maybe they can, and a year later actually, you know, getting in the cage and doing it, it's very fulfilling.
You see us train very hard every single day here in the martial arts gym, and we go hard. Reason why I say is because we try to push our body to the limits, to face pain, to be able to keep pushing through that and to be able to keep going forward.
I've experienced every range of emotion, plus a couple of emotions I don't think I've ever known I've had. Being here, running it, and then seeing the stories. And I think that's one of the hooks that keeps me really going.
We're all from up in this area, we're used to, you know, oil field mentality. You just go, 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 you got to get it done.
You wake up, it's super cold, you know, our summers are short.
How many? We got 12 months of winter? Okay, maybe 10.
I think the Grande Prairie MMA community just needs to keep growing.
We are that fighter. We're that epitome of that underdog.
There's places, bigger cities that have so much more opportunity is what people think.
There's very different things about Grande Prairie that makes me say I'm from Grande Prairie.
I am Grande Prairie.
I am Grande Prairie.
And I am Grande Prairie.
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 We are Grande Prairie.
Don't mess with us.